Mm.
Water is one of the most critical things for survival of your plants. In the ideal world, you would get an inch of rainfall in a week's time, but divided up 2 or 3 times during the week. So, 30 inch on Monday, a 30 inch on Wednesday, and a 30 inch on Friday would be great. But we don't get that, of course. So during periods of drought, when you're not getting rainfall, you want to kind of mimic what you would ideally get from nature, getting that inch of rain per week. So dividing that up several times during the week with your irrigation or with your sprinkler system. At the UT Gardens during periods of drought, we water about every 5 to 7 days, depending on how dry it is, the temperature. We check the beds, we go out and manually look and see if we need to water. And when we do, we water for a long period of time. It's sometimes as much as 6 hours, depending on which type of irrigation we're using. And we're trying to saturate that top 6 to 9, maybe even deeper if you've got trees and shrubs in the area, inches of soil. If you're using a system that's kind of automatic, you may want to use a timer. And so there's all kinds of timers. This is a digital one. It's you can set it up with actually different zones in the landscape. At home, I actually use just an old dial type, and I don't have one with me, but one where I just turn the dial for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half. So if I'm running a sprinkler, like an oscillating sprinkler here, I will set it for an hour and a half and I'll go on to another spot in the garden. It's also very helpful for me to set the timer on my phone if I have multiple sprinklers going and I don't have timers on them. If I'm going to be in the house, I'll use the cook stove, the timer on my cook stove to remind me to go out and shut that water off. So using timers, using your phone, using the cook stove in the house will keep you from running the water too long and overwatering. So a big mistake people make is get their irrigation system set up either by themselves or by hiring someone and have it all set and never look at it again throughout the summer. So what can happen? Well, lots of things can happen. One is if you're getting rainfall outside, you're getting probably way too much water on your irrigation. Overwatering is actually the #1 killer of landscape plants inside, but also in the house. The #1 killer of house plants is too much water. So you want to purchase a rain sensor. So it's this device that collects the rainfall from the sky. So if you get ½ inch of rain, it will automatically tell your irrigation system, I don't need to water today. So purchase one of those rain sensors that collects the rainfall. The other thing you need to do is every couple of weeks you should run your irrigation. Again, if you've got one of these automatic systems with a timer, there'll be an option where you can make it come on, and you want to walk around and be sure all your heads are functioning properly. Oftentimes, a hole will come in a head during periods of drought. You can have mice, squirrels, rabbits chew holes in your irrigation line, and you'll have a leak, or a head will break, or a head will be shooting the wrong direction. So about every couple of weeks, walk your irrigation system and make sure it's functioning properly. So if you're using a timer for an automatic system, you need to know how much water you're putting on. And again, you want to divide out how much you're putting on about 3 times a week, so dividing roughly an inch of water. So using this timer system, there'll be an option where you can go in here and manually make it come on, and you'll want to set something out to catch the water. And you can Google this, but the tuna can test is one you see mentioned a lot, where you take tuna cans and you set them in your landscape on a flat surface where your irrigation's hitting, and you measure the amount of water. And you can do this with anything. As long as it's got it straight up and down side and it's setting on a flat surface, this really becomes a rain gauge. And so you would set this in your landscape, you would run your irrigation for 15 minutes and then go out and measure to see how much water you have in there. So for instance, if you were going to put an inch on, which you should never put on an inch at one time, but if you were going to put an inch on, you would, if you got a 1/4 of an inch in 15 minutes, that would equal an inch per hour. So that's how you kind of figure out. Again, you can Google this and find different methods, but we call that the tuna can test.
Alright, so the setup that we have going on right here is kind of our version on the tuna can test. We are testing to see how much water our oscillating sprinkler is putting out on the area in a given amount of time. And I hope you can see, but I have positioned some small clear cups in my tall grass. The grass is actually helping to hold those cups up so that they don't tip over. I'm running the sprinkler in its normal spray pattern, just as I would if I were trying to spray, say, the front of my perennial bed. And I'm timing this. And in 15 minutes, we're going to check these cups we're going to measure how much water is in each of them and take the average and then multiply that average times 4, and that will give us how much water in inches we are putting out per hour. Alright, so we ran our oscillating system for 15 minutes on the dot. I went out and collected all of our cups and brought them up here on the porch. And I don't know if you can see how much water we have in here, but I've measured each one of these and they are all right at ½ an inch in the bottom of these containers. So we don't really have to do any averaging because they were all very similar in the volume of water that they caught. So we collected ½ an inch of water in 15 minutes. So this would lead us to believe that if we ran it for an hour, we would get 2 inches of water.
So next we're going to talk about sprinklers, and these are sprinklers that you would move around in the garden that connect up to your water hose. And the main two types of sprinklers are oscillating, which go back and forth, and then impact. And the impact sprinkler goes around and around, and we're going to demonstrate how these work outside in a little bit. Again, quality is a lot. You're going to pay a lot for a good quality sprinkler, but such as this dram sprinkler, but this may last you 10, 15 years if you take care of it. And there are other qualities all in between of them. This is also different brands, different qualities have different ways of adjusting the pattern. And so the way these two work, there's these little notches that you move back and forth that will adjust how far back and forth the pattern goes. These work better than the older style that had this little dial here that would either go left or right or middle or full. You can adjust these much more precise. So also the heavier the sprinkler, the less likely it is to flop over if you've got high pressure. And this is really the case with the impact. So I've got 4 different impact sprinklers here. Here at the UT Gardens we have really good water pressure, and I can tell you this is the only one that works well for us because it's heavy. And even with this, on occasion I've had it flip over. What I do not recommend you buy is these that are lightweight plastic. Even with medium to low pressure, when this thing comes around, it can actually flip over in the garden. Now, you can take bricks and put on it, and we do that. We weight them down in the garden. But if you're going out to buy one to start with, buy a good quality one. Even this dram one is just a little bit small. If you look at the spread on this, it's metal, it's heavy, but the spread on this is not as much. So you can see what happens when this comes around here. It actually pops up and will slide over. And then the one I would never recommend anybody buy is the one you push down in the ground. Well, for starters, if it's really dry, and unless it's a bed you've tilled, it's hard to push it in the ground. You would think the spiky thing would go in, but if your ground's hard, it's not. And once you get it in there, it may work well for a little bit, but once the water softens the ground around it, it actually ends up moving and coming out of the ground. So I don't recommend you buy the one that's just the stake that goes in the ground, because it's not going to last very long. So these are called impact. We talked about the oscillating going back and forth. The impact makes a circle. You can adjust them, and we'll show you that when we get outside. But it's called impact because this flap goes back and forth hitting the water, and we'll demonstrate that when we get outside. So two kinds of sprinklers, one that makes the round pattern, one that goes back and forth. And again, buy good quality ones and you'll have them for years to come. This one was actually here when I came, and I came here in 2002, and I'm still using this sprinkler. So a good quality and lasts a long time.
Alright, so Jason actually recorded a great demo on how to adjust and maintain your oscillating sprinklers, but the file corrupted when I tried to transfer that to the computer. So I'm going to attempt just to use one that I have here at my house and kind of go over some of the information that he talked about. So I'm sure as many of you are aware, these levers right here regulate how far back and forth your spray pattern is going to go with your sprinkler. So if you only wanted to irrigate, you know, your flower bed and not your lawn, you may want it only to go back and forth from this area. If you wanted to have a full pattern that arched all the way over, maybe in a lawn type setting, you would spread them out as far as possible from one another. Always be careful not to forcefully move this bar, because you could strip out the motor that is inside of here. And I will Well, I can't do it and hold it at the same time, so hold on. Okay, so if you unscrew this nut, you can see right here there's a little tab, and that is what keeps your bar in line with this arrow right here on your sprinkler. And wherever this line is pointing, that is the part of the cycle that it is currently on. So if for some reason your motor's running but this part of your sprinkler isn't in the right position, unscrew this nut and make sure that this tab is inserted in that little dent. Sometimes, like in these plastic construction that I have right here, that tab can break off if this bar is forcefully moved, so we need to be really careful when we're handling these. Another neat tip about these oscillating sprinklers is that the plug end of the oscillator actually unscrews, and it has a little cleaning plug on it. So if at any point in time one of your emitters becomes clogged and isn't spraying correctly, you can unscrew this, just stick that little pick down in the holes of those sprinkler emitters, and you can get those unclogged and get things working correctly again.
This is the impact sprinkler, and we're going to turn it on in a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about how you adjust impact sprinklers. So impact can make a full circle where it goes all the way around, doing 360 degrees, or you can make it do a little piece of a pie. And you do that by adjusting the little pieces here, and each brand has its different method. This one is metal. Again, this is Rainbird. This is one that was here before I came in 2002, so it is well built. It's lasted a long time. So moving these different directions will adjust the flow. So if you see here, I've got these close together, so you're just going to do a little portion of pie. As you open these up, it's going to make a lot larger portion of pie. So you can take your hand and move it and see roughly how big it's going to flow. You can also, how far it squirts out is adjusted by this little flap right here going up and down. So if you only wanted to go, say, 15 feet, you would push this thing down. If you wanted to go maybe 25, you would bring it up higher. Also, the amount of water that lands closer to it as opposed to far away is adjusted by this little screw here. And as you screw that in, it's going to affect the stream of water here. And a lot of this just comes by doing. You just got to sit down and play with it and learn it yourself. You can read or listen to me all day long about it, but till you actually get out and play with it yourself, is how you're really going to learn from doing it. This is an all metal construction, again, will last a long time. Then beside me here, we've got a cheap plastic version that's been around for quite a few years here, and it adjusts. It's very similar, except you have these plastic tabs that make it go left or right, or again, depending on how big area you want to cover. So when it hits that tab, it clicks and it goes back the other direction, and it hits that one and it clicks back and forth. Now, if you want to make it go full circle, you actually just lift up this lever. Sometimes easier said than done, and then it will just go all the way around. It won't stop. It'll just be a continuous circle. So the way this one adjusts the distance is this little dial up here on top, which adjusts this flap here. So again, the different brands will work differently, but they're somewhat all similar. So we're going to turn this one on. I want you to see how this plastic one is really lightweight, and you can easily, if you got high pressure, which I'm not sure we're going to have enough pressure today because I've got a splitter on this hose, but we'll see. It may fall over. And again, you would put a brick on it if you were going to use this, or this one's heavy enough you won't have to have that. So we'll go ahead and turn this one on, and make sure we don't get wet here. All right, I'm going to attempt it. So I'm going to show you on this one how to adjust it. So you see now it's going way out there. So if I want to make it do a smaller distance, I'm actually going to, you just grab a hold of this to keep it from wetting you, and then you can adjust this one again up at the top here. Actually now it's going maximum. If you look out there, it's probably going 30 feet. But if you notice, there's nothing getting water in between here. Now when the little impact thing hits it, it makes a little bit of water go in between. But then there's a little screw here on the side, hard to see here, where my finger is, that I can adjust, and I'm having trouble turning this. Oh, here we go. And you can see now it's actually making some water come in between, but it also doesn't go as far. So again, a lot of this is just playing around with it and learning yourself. With some of these impact sprinklers, you can hook another hose up if you've got plenty of pressure in your water and say your lawn, a big area, new sod. You can have another hose going in here with another sprinkler in place with it. Also, if you need to clean it, you can take this off and get the grime out from there as well. So I'm going to shut this one off, and while I got it off, again, I love the handy-dandy valve here. I'm going to unscrew this one. So if I wanted to go to a different type sprinkler, again, I wouldn't have to go to my water source and turn it off. But I'm just going to hook up this better quality one, and it's already got a valve on it, so I'm going to take it off since I left this one on the hose. And hook it up, and I'm just going to demonstrate with it because it's a little bit different. Make sure we don't get wet here. Hey, so it's a little bit easier to see on this one because the valve is small enough that the lever is, but if I push that lever down, you can see how it affects the spray. It also affects the distance on it as well. And then the screw here again, if I screw it in, you can see it puts more water closer to the source as far as opposed to going further out. So lots of adjustments on it. And then again, unscrew this so we don't get wet. So now it's going a long way off. And again, you can adjust how far it goes by moving these metal pieces here. To me, the advantage of the impact sprinkler is it will cover a much bigger area as opposed to the oscillating sprinkler, but it doesn't distribute the water as evenly. If you look at this arch here, again, much more water is going at the end of the arch as it is closer to you. So it's not quite as even distributed as well as that oscillating sprinkler. But you know, for a lawn setting, this would be ideal because you can hook several of these together if you need to. And then you would overlap these, you know, against a circular pattern. And this would be similar to a in-ground pop-up irrigation system. Most of those are going to spray in a circular pattern. So that's a little bit about impact and oscillating sprinklers. So having the right quality and the good quality equipment for any gardening task, but especially watering, makes the task more enjoyable. So let's talk about water hoses a little bit and kind of some pros and cons. This is a vinyl hose. It does have some reinforcement in it. A vinyl hose will kink more than a rubber hose, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They are lighter weight, so if you're pulling them around the garden, they are easy or on your body. They're also, typically they're green, which to me is not favorable. If you look at your landscape and you've got a black hose, you don't notice the black in the landscape. Here at the UT Gardens, we only use black hoses because they disappear. You take a photograph and you don't even notice it, but you do see these bright green. But this is lighter weight. It's easier to pull around the garden. It also, for the most of them, they keep your hands relatively clean, where this black rubber hose, which is high quality, it's going to be around for many, many years to come. It's heavy, but it also, as it ages, you end up getting black on your hands, which that bothers some people. So think about that when you're purchasing hose. This hose probably costs 2, maybe even 3 times as much as a vinyl hose, depending on, you can buy different quality vinyl hoses as well. Much less likely to kink. Some hoses have a lifetime guarantee, such as the Craftsman hoses, so you can take it back and get it replaced. I can tell you, I've had some of these Craftsman hoses almost 20 years now, so they are very long lasting. So choosing the right hose for your situation. Perhaps if you're not going to be dragging one around a lot, you might want to go with the black hose, the rubber hose, because again, it is heavy, especially for older people pulling around. It is harder on the body. So keep those in mind. Choosing a good quality hose, or the hose that fits your needs the best. The hoses that stretch out, they're short-lived. You might get 1, sometimes 2 years out of them. After a while, they quit slinking back and forth. They are handy for a patio area where you don't have a big area. They don't put out the volume as a hose like this because they're typically not as big around either, so keep that in mind. So a couple different options on hoses.
Water wands are one of the most important irrigation accessories to have in your landscape toolkit. I prefer water wands that have breaker heads on them, and what this essentially means is that it has many holes at the end of that head, and it breaks the force of water, allowing a larger volume of water to come through that head, but spread that out into a larger area and have a more gentle flow. That way you aren't beating your plants. There are several different levels or types of breakers on the market that you can purchase. The more holes that are in the head of a breaker, the more volume of water that you are going to be getting out of that head. Also, they can be made from different materials. So there are some all plastic heads, which would be, the economy version. We've got some all metal heads, which would be considered like your heavier commercial types. And then there's an in-between. It's a heavy poly head that has a rubber rim around it. So in case you dropped it on, say, concrete or, your porch or a paver, that plastic head would be protected and less likely to break. Another neat thing about these heads is that they are removable. They have threads on the end of them, so you can, if one head actually does break, you can always replace that with another. Of course, there's also a wide range of different types of wands and types of triggers that control that flow of water. Of course, a traditional method would be, that handheld trigger where you squeeze it, and of course, most of them have a little brake that you can put on there so you don't have to wear your hand out holding it the entire time, but I really don't like messing with that. I would prefer to have either a shut-off valve on the end of that wand where I can actually turn that flow of water on and off where the wand meets the hose. Or they've got some newer versions out there. Dram makes one that's called a one touch, and all you have to do is do a flip of the thumb, move a little lever, and that shuts the water on and off. So that might be something you'd like to look for. And finally, those wands also come in a variety of sizes. You can get anywhere from, shorter 18-inch to longer 30-inch reaches. Some are even adjustable, so you could serve a variety of purposes with one all-purpose wand. They are great for, reaching around corners, reaching up high. If you've got hanging baskets or ferns, things of that nature, and can really save your back in a lot of instances.
Another thing you may want to consider that's going to make it easier when you're swapping between wands and sprinklers and different devices on the end of your hose is something called a quick connect. And the way this one works, you screw this portion on the end of your water hose, and then the part that fits in it, actually pull this back and it fits down in there. You screw this in on your device that you're watering with, and so it makes it, instead of having to unscrew, you can quickly switch. Got one already put in this one. You can switch back and forth between devices, so it makes it a lot easier. So you can buy these in brass, you can buy these, there's a plastic version here as well, and obviously they're not interchangeable. You got to stick with the same brand, the same type, depending on what when you're swapping between different pieces that go on the end of the water hose. But anyway, that kind of speeds things up, so you may want to look for quick connects.
The most economical drip irrigation system for home gardeners is definitely going to be just your general soaker hose. Soaker hoses are porous. They seep water from the entire hose section, so we've got less control over how much water is applied or the volume, that's being put out over a certain amount of time, but it will certainly soak a particular area. Now, one drawback for soaker hoses is that they aren't very long lived. You're going to get about 1 or 2 seasons out of them. They degrade quickly in the sun and can also be easily cut when you are hoeing in the garden, or if you've got that soaker hose covered up by mulch and you forget it's there, even if you're just installing new plantings. So definitely some pros and cons to soaker hoses. Next on the list for drip irrigation systems would be utilizing what we call drip tubing and drip tape. And Jason's going to tell us a little bit about that right now.
So we use this type of irrigation in the parking lot at work because here at the gardens, we don't want to use sprinklers. We try not to because the water ends up going on the asphalt and running down the ditch. So we use the drip hose in our beds here. and we snake it around so it is flexible. You do have to be careful. You can kink it, and once it kinks, it's hard to get it unkinked. Sometimes you have to cut it and replace it, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But so you can buy this in 500-foot rows where it can be cut to the length that you would like. And then there's all these pieces and parts that you have to go with it. So for instance, if you're going to make a sharp bend, you may need an elbow. And the way these pieces work, they just push on. And so you would actually push this on the end. So if you were joining two pieces together, you would push this in, and then you would push this one in here, and then you won't be able to get it apart. So that's why I'm not doing it. But you push really hard till it goes on. If you were to cut it, which is so easy to cut if you're hoeing or using a shovel, that's one of the cons to it, is it's easy to cut by accident. You can cut the hole out, and then you fix it with the joiner that you see here. There are also T's that you can put in if you're wanting to make a T, or depending on the pattern you're doing in your bed. You also want to consider a pressure regulator. If you've got high pressure, the pressure regulator makes the pressure consistent, which makes the water flow coming out of the drip line more consistent. And then also, one drawback, sometimes the emitters can get stopped up. So if you've got trash in your water, I never hook one of these up without turning on the spigot and making sure there's no trash in the end of the spigot. But then you can also buy filters that fit on these that will filter. So this would go at the spigot, so it filters the water before it goes into the hose itself, so it doesn't clog the emitter there. So yeah, the drip tape works. For us, it's the best here. Some advantages to the drip tape, or I'm sorry, the drip hose, and you can buy one that's called a tape as well. That's why I keep saying tape. It does conserve water. The water is down at the level of the soil. You may even put mulch over the top of this so you don't even see it, and so it really conserves the moisture because the water's down low, so there's very little evaporation. Also, because the water's directed to the roots of the plant, not up on top where the mulch is and maybe where weed seeds have blown in or fallen, you have less weeds in the landscape than you would if you were overhead watering. So that's another advantage. It saves time. You don't have to drag a hose around in the garden. As we talked about earlier, you can hook it up to a timer, whether it's one that you've got coming on 3 times a week for a certain length of time, or the timer that the dial you just turn for an hour and a half and you walk away and come back. So it saves time as far as dragging a hose around. It's also affordable, more affordable than the in-ground pop-up irrigation, which is quite expensive. Not per se as affordable as a water hose and a sprinkler, but it is affordable. Long-lasting, this is a relatively good quality. If you take care of this, if you're careful with it, you can get 10 years out of this in the landscape. In our beds here where we have annuals, we actually take it out each spring, till the bed, plant our annuals and lay it back in there. Or actually we till the bed, lay the irrigation back down, that's the one that we just took out, and then plant. And so we reuse it year after year. If you got it in a landscape with shrubs and trees, obviously you wouldn't be taking it up every year. So it does last a long time. It's easy repaired. If you nick this with a hose, you can take actually a pair of pruners and cut this and cut the hole out. And again, using one of the joiners, you can put it back together. So it's easy to repair. Unlike in-ground irrigation, if you have a crack or a break in PVC pipe, you got to dig a big old hole up, and it's more involved in it. So that's definitely a bonus to it. The cons I've already mentioned. The emitters can get clogged up. This better quality is less likely to get clogged, so buy a better quality. It is easy to kink when you're installing. It comes in a big old roll. I recommend you take that roll, you set it out in the sun and let it warm up before you start unrolling it, and it's less likely to kink. It's also easy if you got 2 people that's stretching it out when you're unrolling it. But it can kink, and again, when you do that, you're going to have to, sometimes you'll have to cut that kink out. I mentioned that a con is easy to cut with a shovel or a hoe. It has medium to low output. During long periods of hot, dry weather, you may have to run it for a long time to catch up with how much water you need. So here in the gardens, there's occasion that I will turn it on in the afternoon and I will let it run to the next morning if it's really, really dry. I'm really trying to saturate the soil. So it may take longer, but again, you're conserving water because it's down there where the roots are. It is also prone to rabbits and mice and squirrels chewing into it. More so if it's exposed. If it's under the mulch, they're not going to see it. But if it's above ground and we're having a dry period, I don't know how those critters know it's in there, but they know there's water in there, and they'll come along and chew holes in it, and so you'll have to repair it that way as well. So this is an example of the drip tubing that we use in the parking lot bed, and because these are long rectangle beds, you can see that we just have straight rows, and we've used the T joints to put it together. So we've got a line coming off our spigot, coming to the end here, and then all these feeders coming off the end of it. So again, these are long straight rows. So this is where we plant annuals each year, as opposed to having trees and shrubs that you might be snaking in and around. So this is an example of a bed that's not a big square. It's kind of crazy shape, who knows. So it sort of snakes around this bed in circles. So starting at the source of the spigot and then ending up in the center of the bed, sort of going around and around. So you see here we have it placed about probably 16 to 18 inches apart. Again, this is mostly where annuals get planted. So this will actually come out of the bed here before we till, and we'll till the bed and we'll lay it back down, then we'll plant our annuals and mulch.
Drip tape is another method of drip irrigation that could be utilized in the home garden. Drip tape is different from drip tubing in that it is actually flat. So it's a flat type of tubing that when filled with water then expands, and it's already pre-punched with holes in it, and you can order that. Those holes punched at different distances, whether it be 12 inches, 18 inches, so on and so forth. Many of the same connection styles as the drip tubing does. Of course, you're going to need to have menders for if you need to slice a hose or add another section of hose onto an existing drip tape. Also, we're going to utilize T's and elbows just like we did in the drip tubing situation. So lots of similarities, but definitely a different product. When we lay out a design for drip tubing and drip tape in the garden, it's good to be aware of the basic setup. So what you're going to have is a main line that essentially runs the length of the garden area, and then you're going to run sections of drip tape off of that main line, and your main line is what is actually hooked up to your water source. You can also utilize drip irrigation in raised beds as well, just on a smaller scale. Shown here in this picture is a good example. In addition to the drip tubing and drip tape that's pre-punched with holes, we can also utilize drip emitters with these types of systems. Lots of different ones are on the market. You can have some that literally just drop drips of water out of those emitters. We have adjustable emitters. We have, many of them are color coded, so some will emit certain volumes of water per sections of time, like a half gallon per hour tip or a 1 gallon water per hour tip. And even still, we have some emitters that will put out a fine mist, and some of these can be installed directly to the drip lines. Some are connected to the drip lines via micro tubing, and others can be connected with the micro tubing and then attached onto a little miniature stake that kind of holds them up above the surface of the ground. And you'll be able to see some more of these examples when we talk about drip irrigation for containers.
So this is a demonstration of an in-ground irrigation system where when you turn it on, the heads pop up, and then when you turn it off, the heads sink back in the ground. So this is the most expensive form of irrigation, and this is a great example right here of what happens when a plant grows in front of it. If you see, this Camasiferous is grown in front of the head, so the plants behind it are not getting water. So there is no perfect irrigation system. The best water is what comes from the sky. You can see on this one there's a little bit of leakage at the bottom, so we talked about maintenance and checking your irrigation at least every couple of weeks to be sure things are working well. So one way to avoid plant material blocking it is to build them up high. So you can put these up on PVC pipes that we've painted black. as tall as you want. So I mean, they could be 6'8". Probably get too high up, it will actually rotate or vibrate some. But when we put them in this bed here, we knew we were going to have lots of shrubs in here, and so we went ahead and built them up a little bit higher. The disadvantage is you can bump it and break it. Also, you got to look at it year round, so it's not as pleasing as one that sinks down in the ground that you don't see. But it's a way, again, to avoid blocking plants, is get it up above the plant material.